Hi, everybody. Welcome to Art and Artists in the EFL Classroom. My name is Brennan Conaway. In this presentation, I'll be discussing my experience using artworks together with a series of questions as teaching materials in an EFL classroom. So as an artist and an EFL teacher, I was curious about possible roles for art in the classroom. So I looked at research studies on visual arts in the EFL classroom. I found only a few studies that documented the benefits of using visual arts in the classroom, but there were definitely benefits. I found through the lit review, teachers who use visual arts help their students learn the target language, multicultural literacy, and to learn multimodal reading skills using image and text together for a larger meaning. I also found the use of visual arts in the classroom reduces social anxiety, increases social inclusion, and promotes critical thinking skills. This last one is going to be a recurrent idea in this presentation, the use of critical thinking skills. So, however, during the lit review, most of these studies focused on art classes or art making, and were not focused on the EFL classes. But during my reading, I found an approach called visual thinking strategies, which looks really promising, like a promising approach for my EFL classes. So Philip Yenawine and Abigail Housen developed visual thinking strategies, the pedagogical framework, to teach students how to investigate visual artworks. Their pedagogy draws on Vygotskian concepts such as scaffolding. I think we're all familiar with that. Scaffolding a student's observations and building a community of dialogue, as well as using images and models in a material form that can be easily referenced. We're going to come back to this quote by Lantoff later. So teachers have had success in using VTS in L1 English classes and have found that it promotes critical thinking skills that transfer to other academic subjects. So I thought that this looked promising. If it can be used for L1 English class, maybe it can be used for L2 English classes. And if these critical thinking skills transfer to other academic subjects, then we can transfer them from kind of an art-based curriculum to, again, an L2 learning L2 learning. So this VTS approach looked promising for my EFL classes, and I luckily got the chance to use it at a Tokyo Arts University, where I developed this 2-semester beginner English course, which uses narrative representational artworks as a focus during classwork. So that's kind of the backstory of my reading of the available literature and then my chance to use it. And before I explain the VTS approach, let's look at some art. What is narrative representational art? So this image that's been lurking in the background of these slides is the Tower of Babel by Bruegel. And this isn't a good example of narrative representational art, which I actually used in my classes. So representational just means that it's realistic. It more or less represents what what it wants to show, right? So this painting wants to show the Tower of Babel, and it represents it realistically. Narrative, of course, means it tells a story. So on a macro level or on a big level, this image, this painting, tells the story of the tower. The tower is rising, is being built here in this small town that you can see in the background or on the sides. And then at a micro level, as we zoom in, we see that there's many stories, there's many narratives. I see here probably a dozen people going about their business, doing different things. Each has a different story. There's a little house here, or a big house, that shows the scale of the tower itself. So there's a narrative at a larger, an overall narrative, and then individual narratives. So visual thinking strategies. What is that? So Yenawine and Housen developed visual thinking strategies to engage students who are visiting the Museum of Modern Art in New York, where Yenawine was the director of education. The VTS pedagogy, it's fairly simple, but it has the potential to yield complex interactions. And this is it in its simplicity. The teacher asks students to look carefully at an artwork for a few minutes, to really look at it deeply. Then the teacher asks 3 questions. What's going on in this picture? What do you see that makes you say that? Right, kind of to back up or support your answer for question 1. And finally, number 3, what more can we find? The idea that there's always more to find in a painting. So what does that look like in practice? This is a possible example. I would ask, what's going on in this picture? A simple student response: people are working. Okay. What do you see that makes you say that? How can you support what you've just said? Well, they are carrying things. We see people carrying things down here. And there are many ladders. So that's some sort of a simple support for kind of a basic answer to number 1. And the third question, what more can we find? So this question is asked of the group to encourage more observations. So in the VTS approach, the teacher reframes the student observations, points to items within the image. I use it, that I was doing it on Zoom, so I was using my cursor to point to what the student was talking about or was referencing. And then I continues the discussion with other student responses to the same series of questions, building this kind of this community of inquiry, looking into these paintings. What do they mean? What is the artist trying to say? So in the classroom, we spent 30 to 45 minutes of every class. These were 90-minute classes, so it was a good amount of time on discussion about art. However, the VTS questions, those 3 questions we just looked at, were not always appropriate or productive for beginner English students. I should mention here that my beginner English students were very kind of mixed in levels. They weren't all strictly beginners. So I adapted these questions, and I'll show in the next few slides some of the adaptations I used and also some of the paintings that we discussed. So here's a dramatic painting. And with this kind of painting, I asked, what's happening in this picture now? And what do you think happened before this? So asking students to imagine and to go deeper to see what might have preceded this scene that we're looking at now. This famous painting by Edward Hopper is again kind of ambiguous, a little bit strange, and open to interpretation. So I would ask, what is the story behind this picture? Students would come up with some ideas about that, and then I'd ask them to support it. Why do you say that? Here was for our Christmas or holiday season, a class during our holiday season. What do you see? And what questions do you want to ask? So again, gets them thinking about the picture. There are things that they don't understand or don't know. Then they get to ask a question. Here again, a very ambiguous, mysterious picture, painting. What do you see in this picture? And then what does that make you think about? Kind of what is your reaction or your additional thoughts about this painting? And finally, kind of a crazy picture from Coney Island a long time ago, probably 100 years ago. What do you see here? And why are they doing that? So this was a chance to generate some sentences and some vocabulary that was pretty unique and they probably hadn't used in previous English language classes. So after 30 weekly class periods, what did I discover? What did I find out? Through teacher observations and qualitative data from student essays. So they were writing essays throughout this course, a student survey at the end of the course, and then their participatory responses during these discussions. That all kind of suggests that art-based discussions increased student participation, engagement, and motivation. So their participation in these discussions was good. Everyone wanted to participate, and everyone was engaged in searching in these paintings for something, for meaning, or a story, or an observation, something that they noticed. And they were engaged and motivated and eager to share their thoughts about these sometimes odd or unusual or mysterious paintings. They were excited to show that. And that was really great to see. As we were describing these paintings in each and every class, they were practicing their descriptive skills. I believe that this VTS component of the course helped my students improve their writing of descriptive essays throughout the course and then for a final essay. So why was VTS pedagogy effective? I think there are two things. It's critical thinking and a referent. So as this quote from Lantoff says, my students and I had this shared concrete image to refer to. It wasn't simply words on a page or kind of an illustration or a photo of two people talking, for example, that we would see in different textbooks. This was a kind of a real thing in front of us that we could all refer to. I think that was really vital. And then, of course, the questions required students to think critically about what they were saying, to dig deeper, either to support what they were saying or to express their thoughts about this, express their observations. Yeah, and so that was really great to see. So a few additional observations. During our art discussions, I noticed students using the there is, there are construction, which I think doesn't come up as frequently as we might want it to in other kinds of exercises. And I find it can sometimes be tricky for students to realize that this is a construction that they can use communicatively. I also saw more locational phrases, such as this is under or on top of or next to or beside. And then I also saw real-time instructions as my students, as they directed my attention and the attention of other students to specific locations in the painting. Sometimes I wouldn't understand what they were referring to, or I would maybe exaggerate my misunderstanding of what they were talking about, and they would, in real time, as a real communicative exercise, they would guide me to something in the painting, and then, of course, make their observation or make their answer. So, final note as we're wrapping this up, visual art and the VTS pedagogy are not just for art school students or just for artists. I believe that narrative representational artworks in the EFL classroom really would benefit any student. And the selection of artworks could be tailored to what a teacher thinks the students would be interested in. And it could also be expanded, of course, beyond paintings to photographs that were representational and narrative. And I think other forms of visual art as well, if you wanted to. Here are my references. I would, of course, these were all informative, and then also the books by Philip Yenawine were also very informative and helpful in for me to put together this course. All right, thank you very much. And I think maybe we'll have some time for questions now. Thank you for listening.